Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. We're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Oh, man. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Monday. It's May the 12th. That's kind of a rocky start for the beginning of things. My intro video just disappeared. I have no idea why. No, that's okay. We'll figure it out after the fact. Sounds like Rumble's having some issues. You know, we haven't had any problems on his YouTube, which is very interesting. I don't know if it's a Rumble-wide problem or just a Kyle Seraphin Show problem, but so be it. All right. So it is Monday. We've got a lot going on, and I want to approach a little bit with the snark, a little bit with the fun. We've got sort of a retrospective. It occurred to me that so much of this stuff is about what we've gone through. It continues to be a story about COVID and how many things were revealed from 2020 and 2021 that we have to continue and remind ourselves about right now. None of these things have gone away. So I'm going to tie it together. We did a Sunday sit down, which I highly encourage you to go and sit down and listen to. Take an hour and a half. And you can watch it in fast speed if you like. But what we've done with the Trump administration being elected is a lot like a tourniquet. And in our Sunday sit down, we talked about the dangers of a potential terrorist attack, a 9/11 2.0. We're just far enough away that a lot of us have gotten so comfortable that we don't even remember. Yes, some of you have lost friends in a global war on terror. Yes, many of you recall the Patriot Act and the dangers that came out there. But do we really viscerally feel it in the same way we did when like the shutdowns were rolling out across the country for COVID-19 in like March and April of 2020? I don't think we do. It's a good time to sit down and remember, you know, do you have a kit nearby to be able to stop the bleed? Do you have the ability to put hands on somebody and stall their descent into eventual death? And that's a hard thing to remember and to think about. But if you're not prepared, then you will be looking back and wondering, why did I not know? Mostly what we do is we have these lessons that we learned after the fact, and we go, God, I wish I had known. Now I'm prepared. But somebody had to suffer the critical consequences up front. So rather than that be the case, we're going to do a little kind of a retrospective on the tourniquet that is the current Trump administration and what definitive care might look like, because we've only paused a lot of the dangers that have happened over the last couple of years. We're going to talk about the border. We're going to end up talking about Democrats not taking it seriously, censorship regime that is pushed down. Every once in a while, I like to just kind of take a step back, look over and go, okay, is the news really what's happening today? Or is there just a broader, weirder, stranger thing happening and we are getting sucked in and forgetting? I think that's where we're going to be. So before we get into that, let's start off today with the folks over at My Patriot Supply. There has been something happening with the farmlands. This is a story about the Chinese. We've got more stories about the Chinese today as well. They've been buying it up. They've been buying up our farmland by the hundreds of thousands of acres, U.S. farmland that they've taken control of, along with critical supply chains, things like fertilizer, animal feed, farming equipment. Why would that be? The Chinese think in the long term. They're tightening their grip on global food production. So if things go south, you need to be ready in your own house. That's why my household has My Patriot Supply. We've got enough for both of the adults to eat for 90 days. That just gives you enough pause to figure out what your next plan is. They are America's largest emergency provider company. So if you guys want to get started right now, you can do so with the 4-week emergency food kit, and you're going to get 4 free 72-hour food kits. That's an additional 12 days of food. You're going to get it absolutely free. That gives you an opportunity to either use it for training or to stash it in places like a vehicle, a bug out location, cache it in different ways. That's 4 weeks of delicious food, up to 25 years that it'll last in storage, 2,000 calories per day. It's shipped fast and free. It also gives you the opportunity, again, to get 4 free 72-hour food kits. Go to preparelikekyle.com, preparelikekyle.com. If you were watching on the screen, that's the website that's there. It's also in the show description. You can claim 12 additional free days of food at preparelikekyle.com. Check them out. Don't leave your family's security to chance. We always say here, prepare or repair. All right, let's get into today's program. I got a lot I want to cover. And that went away too. How about that? All of our videos disappeared. How fun. Okay, cool. Well, that doesn't make too much difference for me because we have all the stories we need to cover right here. I want to start off with something that tells us the power of prayer. We may remember that there was a moment in time, maybe a week and a half ago, when American hero and intrepid muckraking journalist James O'Keefe found himself contemplating all that he was worth. And he asked for prayer. And so I want you guys to realize prayer works, okay? Never forget that. This was James about a week and change ago.
I'm going dark. I'm not suicidal. Pray for me. This one scares me, guys.
Okay, that scared James. He went into a dangerous hiding moment because he realized there was a possibility that him revealing multi-year-old Epstein file information might in fact result in some sort of attack against him. I just wanted you all to realize that he is okay. He did survive, and he's even thriving. Not a week later, this was him on the rooftop of the new building that he's rented for his media group in Miami. They're doing okay. This is DJ James doing his thing. If you cannot see what's on the screen right now, you've got a man wearing a body armor with the word press emblazoned across it. He has gray hair and sunglasses in the dark. There's some relatively known right-wing people. There's a man wearing a balaclava. I think he's actually representing either the Foot Clan from the Ninja Turtles, or he is part of the Cobra Commando crew. There's some sort of security-looking guy standing up on the stage, and then what appears to be James O'Keefe, not just not scared anymore, but having a great time and DJing a party. Yes, he does have silver hair. Some people said, well, that's not James because he doesn't have silver hair that changed in just one day or 1 week. It turns out he actually sprays gray into his hair. When I asked him about it, he told me it was part of his persona. So I just wanted you guys to realize your prayers work. The power of prayer is real and it is ongoing. And so, don't be afraid to pray for those people who ask for it, especially our right-wing heroes. Let's talk about some fun stuff. Let's talk about the movement of people outside of the United States that don't belong here. The so-called this is what I voted for moment. This is a U.S. deportation tracker counting arrest, detentions, and border crossings. I mentioned to you that I think the Trump presidency is like a tourniquet. A tourniquet is not the solution to a problem. A tourniquet is a moment for you to reset and get the plan together. And right now, the plan is not actually coming together in the way that we would hope. The Trump administration for this year is actually set to deport at best as many as Obama did. Now, Obama did like sort of the porter-in-chief thing. They were actually using this to run on. It's kind of interesting, but it is also worth noting that the Democrats are realizing the hypocrisy that Joe Biden's administration was pushing out there. They claimed that there was nothing they could do. They needed Congress to pass a law, that they needed more power. That is the way that communists always operate. That is the way that Marxists and socialists and the hard left always operate. What they say is, if only you gave me more power, then I could solve the solution. It is an unfalsifiable premise that if I just had this thing that I don't have, then I could do the thing that I am not doing. The only way that you can falsify that is by putting somebody in place who actually does the thing they said without getting the thing that you asked for. And the Trump administration essentially has done that. They have stopped the bleed. But what they have not done is replace the fluids or put blood back into this country. You can stop the number of people that are coming over the southern border, but if you don't remove the people that are here, the damage is already done. In the same way that you can put a tourniquet on a dying man who was shot in the leg and has a femoral artery bleed, and he is slowly bleeding out, actually rather rapidly bleeding out all of the blood that carries oxygen to all of his vital organs. And you can stop that. But if you don't do something about the loss of blood, if you do not either replenish it or put him into definitive care surgically to stitch that up, he's going to live with a tourniquet on forever. And that's not a solution. I think that's where we're kind of in the danger right now. This article is quite telling. It's coming from NBC. And I'm going to show you some very good news about what has been going on as far as like the encounters that Border Patrol is having with people. And at the same time, we're not seeing deportation numbers that will live up to what Trump said he would do. And I think it's difficult. Now, I'm willing to give that one a strong ramp because mobilizing every federal agency to go and do that work, you actually do get time. That actually is fair for the quote unquote Bongino rule, the 6 to 8 months situation. I don't think that you can immediately mobilize all federal law enforcement, and there are plenty of people that want to resist that operation. What should happen, though, is anybody that is resistant to doing that work should be eliminated. We should be using the powers of removing and suspending people for insubordination aggressively and without any mercy. President Donald Trump came into office promising the largest mass deportation in U.S. history, targeting more than 10 million unauthorized migrants. You've got to love the language they use, living inside the United States. And since then, data shows that the border crossings have plummeted. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, have doubled, so they've hired more people, and the number of people in detention is at an all-time high. All of those things seem fairly decent. The problem is the actual deportations are not going to be anywhere close to what they wanted. NBC News reported that ICE deported 11,000 illegals in February, just over 12,000 in the first 4 weeks of March. March had an extra couple of days, so they did a little bit more than that. But if you're doing, let's say, 10 to 15,000 a month, you're going to get not numbers that we need to hit 10 million. You're not even going to come close, which Steve Friend and I have talked about. Again, you can stop the bleed and still not have what you need done. So I want people to realize that there is the initial action on scene, and then there's definitive care. And what we need to see more follow through on is the definitive care. Luckily, the media has also picked up on the fact that they don't know what to do about this sort of thing. I got a fun little clip from this little roundtable show that this gal does, Abby Phillips. She continually has interesting people on saying funny things. This is her little sort of opining about the border and that it actually is working. They seem shocked that Donald Trump was able to do the thing that he said, at least stopping the bleed.
Trump has succeeded. He has shut the border down. There are no border crossings virtually happening right now in this country.
So, okay, fine. So the border crossings have stopped. The reason why is because he seems like he would follow through and make people go away. They haven't rolled out the welcome mat. And the reason that Democrats seem shocked about it is because they think the American media or the people are dumb enough to buy into anything that is said to them. If we say it on television, it must be true. That seems to be the perspective. At least that seems to be the way that the previous vice president who ran for president was carrying things. Remember, she was very sad about kids in cages and children lined up and the deportation and separations of families. And then at the same time, she was named border czar. This was one of the big issues coming across in 2024. And I think it probably was one of the sinking issues for her. In addition to the word salads, she couldn't even stand up to scrutiny from Lester Holt, who's a friendly.
There were members of us, Julian was there, members of Congress. They would not let us enter the place, members of the United States Congress. So I walked down the road, I climbed a ladder, and I looked over the fence. And I'm going to tell you what I saw. I saw children lined up single file based on gender, being walked into barracks.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
Don't understand, or it just completely destroys your argument. She doesn't understand because obviously that was going to be the crippling line. Why are you not paying attention to the thing that you said you would be interested in doing? And the evidence, the proof is in the pudding. Here, this is kind of an interesting little graph here. I found this is an aged graph showing border crossings going back to January of 2000. So what you're seeing on the screen is a spike in, let's say, January, February. No, that looks like it's March. It's March of March of 2000. It's over 200,000, 220,000, something like that. These are immigration or Border Patrol encounters, rather, with what they call migrants, monthly migrants, but these are actually, illegal aliens attempting to come into the country. It plummeted after 9/11, as you can imagine. down into the like 50,000 person range. And then it kind of spikes on an every year or so, every 2 years or so, there's these kind of spikes. And it kind of remained relatively lower and constant throughout the Bush years. Then we moved into Obama, and starting in January of 2010, it actually was as low as it has been for quite a while. And that was the case right up until Donald Trump came in. He more or less maintained it right up until just before COVID. You have a spike there in May of 2019. Quite interesting. A spike localized at 132,000. They always say that whatever comes in, you've also got about 2/3 of those people, or 2x more of those people actually made it in. So they catch 1/3 of those people who attempt. That's kind of like hard math. It's hard to say that math is true because you're talking about something that we don't have the ability to measure, but that's the estimate. So if 130 something thousand people came in, and yes, I realize it's yellow. I didn't make the screen. If 132,000 came in, that means you probably had like 260 plus 270,000 people got away. That's in a month. That is in 1 month, which is fairly shocking. Okay. Then it plummets all the way down during COVID when they put in the Title 42 rules, and they got it down to the point where it was like 16,000. That's pretty decent, but that's still far more than it was. Okay. Then we get in Joe Biden, and then it spikes. Okay. And I'm telling you this because I'm going to show you the graph change when Trump comes in. But if you look at 21, it spikes up to 200,000 during individual months there. Then it moves on to a high peak of 250,000 in December 23. In December of 2023, we had 250,000 encounters, which means probably 750,000 people attempted to come in during that month. That is insanity. And then either the demand died off, or the presidential election cycle began and the campaign began in earnest, and they realized they had to do something about it, and they began to do something. And so you had this trickle off. Look at that. That is a precipitous drop. So we have an article. Do I have the article? It's actually listed on here. Encounters with migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border peaked in December of 2023, but they have plummeted since then. This is an attempt by the media to cover for Joe Biden, saying that he's doing the job. The funny thing is that you can actually click and see what happened when Trump walked in. And so this moves forward. These are Border Patrol apprehensions going from 2000 to February of 2025. In other words, giving you the first, let's say, month of the Trump administration. And in that first month, it went from 58,000, where they were very proud of it. Looks like it dropped down into about the low 50s. And then you've got the first Trump month, and it's 8,400. It's orders of magnitude more successful. That sort of tells you that these people never cared about it. They never attempted it. And so they destroy the unfalsifiable premise that you just needed to give me more power. They never needed more power. What they needed was the will to act. And now we're also seeing that the alternative is, can we make this into a political spectacle? So we are seeing Democrats step out and do this political spectacle where they're going to go out and attack ICE agents. And this is actually fairly telling. This is a woman named Monica McIver. If you haven't seen this, she's a congressperson. She goes out and decides to get into a fight. She is a fat black woman. There's no other way to explain what she looks like. You'll hear it when you hear her voice. She's a fat black woman who is fighting physically with ICE members so that she can do congressional oversight, because that's their job. Remember, the same as Kamala Harris. The only time they care about this thing is when there's a spectacle to be made. CNN had a spokesperson on from the White House, and she's out there going, don't be surprised if some of these people get wrapped up, because we have footage that shows that she was getting physical and making contact. This is as bad as some of the contact that got people's door knocked down for January 6th. You're attacking federal officers. You could file an AFO on this. In any case, here's sort of CNN trying incredulously saying, wait, she body slammed somebody?
We should let viewers know there will likely be more arrests coming. We actually have body camera footage of some of these members of Congress assaulting our ICE enforcement officers, including body slamming a female ICE officer. So we will be showing that to viewers very shortly.
You say a video of members of Congress body slamming ICE
That's correct.
officials?
That's correct, sir. It's disgusting.
Okay, and so if you have that video, are you suggesting that members of Congress will be arrested who were there yesterday?
This is an ongoing investigation, and that is definitely on the table.
Who has the video?
ICE does, and we will be releasing that very shortly.
Okay.
It's like, really? So here you go. Here's the coverage of it. She was asked about it when she appeared on CNN. This is Monica MacGyver, again, Congresswoman, explaining that she wasn't a body slammer because she's never had any training in body slamming, in the same way that you could never tell if somebody was a woman because you're not a biologist. Although everybody seemed to be a biologist during the COVID stuff, didn't they? Didn't everyone become a virologist? Didn't everyone become an economist and know about tariffs? Didn't everybody become an expert on everything because we have the internet? She doesn't know how to body slam, so how could she have body slammed? Here it is.
Congresswoman MacGyver, I want to go back to some of the footage. We were looking at some, and I want our viewers to see that you are the woman in the red blazer as we show them. The DHS says that obviously that there were chaos, that maybe you were trespassing. You can talk about that, but the DHS also says that, in their words, you were body slamming an ICE officer. Is that what we're looking at? Is that what happened?
Absolutely no. I mean, I honestly do not know how to body slam anyone. There's no video that supports me body slamming anyone. We, as Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman said, we were simply there to do our job. Therefore, oversight visit and what you're watching in a video, and we don't have all of the body cam, and we hope that all of the body cam is released. It was a very tense situation. It unfortunately did not have to be like that. They created that confrontation, they created that chaos, and then ultimately went to arrest the mayor of the largest city of New Jersey, who is my mayor and my constituent. And it was very difficult to watch that happen. But absolutely, I did not body slam anyone.
Okay, well, she didn't body slam anyone. And obviously the people who were at the place, the facility that were doing their job, you know, they were just doing their job, but they also made it worse by doing their job because these are members of Congress. They don't have to do the normal thing, do they? They don't have to like stand in line with people. They don't have to mingle with the unwashed masses. You must part the Red Seas and get out of their way because they're to do oversight. That's what they want to do. They just showed up and demanded access to a facility that's being run by the Article 2 executive. Oh, it'd be weird if only we had like the body cam footage of somebody who decided to get physical. There's a female ICE agent. So you're seeing that in the background. There she is. She's getting chest to chest with somebody, engaging in a confrontation. Seems like the ICE people are doing their job. They're saying, hey, why don't you not do that, lady? How about you don't run after? Imagine if they cared about their own constituents in the same way that they care about illegal aliens. Okay? So there's body cam footage from multiple different officers, all on these sort of those Axon cameras. There's a bunch of examples of it. Failure to retreat. They actually have her chest bumping and landing on one of the male officers that's blocking a gate. And a lot of this stuff has the same vibe as the Doge kind of thing. You remember they had 20 Congress people standing outside of Doge saying, oh, you know, we need to come in and look around. We need to see what's going on in USAID. And there's just one guy standing out there going like, no, you can't. And he was kind of a hero because he was really disinterested. ICE is actually wrapping people up and kinetically taking them into custody. And whatever happens to you when someone is trying to take someone into custody, that's on you, it turns out. You've chosen that path. So shame on you if that's what you want to go do. There's no good reason for people to physically engage with law enforcement. And, you know, you don't have to agree with what law enforcement's doing, but it's really straightforward. If you want to deal with this, you can do it later. These people are hoping for that soundbite, for that one little clip. It just turns out it just went the wrong way on them, so they look completely ridiculous. And the problem is, I think, they no longer own the entirety of the media operation. There's too much social media, there's too much push, and there's no method, especially with X being what it is right now. I think most of the other companies have gone the same route. You're seeing the social media companies realize that that's a losing battle to try and censor, to try to stop everybody from understanding what's happening. They already lost that route. And I think the tech companies are faster than the old mainstream media, which is probably why we have Jen Psaki sitting at a desk right now. We're going to do a quick ad read, and then we're going to get into the sort of censorship nature of this. If you control the narrative and you can control what people can see every night, if you can knock it off the internet and you can scrub it from people, then you can actually tell people that there was no body slam. Today we have the body slam because the game has changed. And so that is one of the single biggest things that we have changed. This is one of the single biggest fixes that has happened for the Trump administration. They've stopped the bleed in some places. The healing part is when you actually let more information come forward. All right, before we go ahead and get into the information part of it, let's talk about Blackout Coffee. Friends over there, if you guys want to check them out, it is blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. It's my name. That's a promo code that will save you 20% on your first order. I recommend it. I think we got another convert here, had another family member visiting at the moment, and she also said, this is a nice smelling roast. We have the pitch dark stuff, which is the espresso. We've been telling you about it for a couple of months. If you guys haven't tried it out, we'll break it down. You're not just buying like a great coffee taste. You're also buying into a company that doesn't hate you. I saw something about Starbucks the other day and it made me kind of like turn my stomach. How many times they hated folks that did really hard work. If you want a coffee company that's built on hard work and grit and American values, you can check out Blackout Coffee. They started in a home garage. They built it up to a 64,000 square foot warehouse facility. They're roasting all the beans as you're seeing on screen. They're packing every order themselves. They're employing 30 hardworking Americans. There's no corporate nonsense, just damn good coffee made by people who give a damn. Again, it's not just a great cup of coffee. You're buying into the idea that the American dream is worth supporting, that American companies are worth supporting, and people who don't hate you, that they care about the same amendments that you do, the civil liberties that should be out there in the world. There's no weak beans. There's no shortcuts. There's no woke nonsense. There's no censorship. They've never once told us what we could or couldn't say, or that they would be scared of supporting our messaging and what we believe is true out here. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Use that promo code. Keep the American dream alive. Drink real coffee. Support a good company. Drink Blackout. And again, it's blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. All right. So, and I've got some here on the desk, as you guys can probably tell. I'm rocking and rolling. Even though some of the videos didn't want to work, we're still going to make it happen. Okay, I do think this goes into a deeper problem of censorship. And it's not done because, as we've learned watching any of these things, Satan is always loudest when he's losing, but that means that there will be more of a gasp. The funny thing is the American people have voted with their thoughts, with their attention span. Even people on the political left, they don't like things being changed up on them. They don't like you trying to mix it and make it work. We're going to talk about Jen Psaki, the so-called Psaki bomb, which has happened, a $30 million contract over at MSNBC, and she's hemorrhaging viewers. And part of it is because people are on to this. This is Mike Benz. This is a somewhat longer clip than I would normally play. But we're going to be talking about the whole of society censorship and or misinformation operation that has been exposed over the last couple of years. And if we're going to talk about this is what we voted for, I think what we voted for was dismantling the gatekeepers that were going to keep us from, for example, that body cam footage. We want to be able to look at the evidence for ourselves and make our own decision. And if you come to the decision that the Jews are the reason that everything is bad, like my friend Ryan Maddow, who I just cannot get through to, so be it. And if you want to decide that the government is lying to you and that other people are lying to you, the media is lying to you, then you can think that too. You should have evidence available. And it turns out you're also going to have to deal with your confirmation bias, because those of us who are looking for something will often find it. But this is the thing that was the real problem. The gatekeeping of accurate information and inaccurate information, of opinions that they didn't like. They should be available to everyone. This is Mike Benz talking about that, former guest on the show.
Everyone should sort of brand like a cow iron into their brain somewhere, which is this concept of the whole of society censorship framework. Now, they will call it the whole of society counter misinformation or counter disinformation framework, but it's censorship. They're not countering it through speech, they're countering it through remove, reduce, inform, all censorship techniques. Now, the whole of society framework is getting 4 different categories of institutions to all work in concert with each other as if they are the nucleus of a single cell. And that is government institutions, private sector institutions, civil society institutions, and news media and fact checkers. This is not my framework, this is theirs. I can play you a 20-minute supercut of them invoking this like a mantra. It looks like a weird scene out of Eyes Wide Shut when you hear them all get in their incantation, whole of society, whole of society. But just to flesh out, for example, what this means in a U.S. context, and I guarantee you in every country of your concern, you will see this exact same phenomenon with this exact same constellation. Just substitute the names for the government agencies, for example. So on the U.S. side, in the government, as I mentioned, you have DHS, FBI, DOD, Department of State, National Science Foundation, which is basically just the civilian arm of the Pentagon. You have specific agencies that are now given, as part of their democracy mandate, censorship of their particular field of expertise. For example, you'll have misinformation grants being given out by the Department of Energy, or you will have COVID censorship grants being given out by our Health and Human Services Department. You now have White House coordination of this with the Biden administration. That was something that was not there during the Trump era, but that is now something that we're dealing with. On the private sector side, these are the tech platforms itself. That is where the censorship actually happens, which means they need liaisons. They need personnel at these tech platforms, because personnel is policy. To get these policies done, you need pressure on the senior level, and you need implementers at the sort of mid-level at the trust and safety staff teams. Then
I'm going to post this entire video, which is about 12 minutes long, I think, for the entire piece. And we obviously weren't going to listen to all that. Maybe it's just a shorter clip on that one. But Mike is talking about something that is truly obvious to those of us who have been watching it. It happens at government and private sector and the NGO type institutions. It has to happen for the whole of society. You need all the parts to work. And the last one of it is the media. This is the headline, by the way, of the so-called body slam. This is the headline coming from Insider New Jersey. Because if you live in New Jersey and you want to get local news from some group and you think, well, I'm sick of the mainstream media, I want to go to some alternative sources, you can go to Insider New Jersey, insidernj.com, and get the following headline. Reps Watson Coleman, McIver, Menendez exercise oversight authority in their visit to ICE detention facility. It's almost like they are mirroring that same mantra. She said we were doing oversight. And so what did they write in their headline? It's oversight. That oversight looked like this again. Remember, it's her getting in the face of federal agents doing the job of taking illegal aliens and putting them into custody for deportation in the future. How do you square those two things? You have to just straight lie. And that lie has to be fueled by media. It has to be fueled by money. I've got a really interesting clip from the Maine Wire, which is another small media source, but I've been kind of keeping an eye on what they have. They've been doing an analysis of USAID funds and then the way that that Maine was taking money locally in their state, which is a small state, and operating in a very, very similar way to the bigger federal government. I'm going to show you a clip here from Chris Wright. Chris Wright is the energy secretary. He's talking about a loan program that the federal government offers to be able to stimulate good ideas in the energy sector. I want you to listen to the numbers. Here's what I'm going to tune you into before you hear him say it. So this is not coming from me. I'm quoting him. He said in the 40 years that this loan program exists, there was $40 billion loaned out, about $1 billion a year. It came out to about $8 million a day. That's a lot of money. During the last few days of the Biden administration, they gave away $100 billion. Okay? 250% more than they had done in the 40 years prior in a period of like 60 or 80 days. Can you fathom what we're talking about here? They just dished out money. This apparatus is expensive and it is completely inorganic. And you're paying for it and I'm paying for it. Here's Chris Wright, the energy secretary.
A little over $40 billion was supplied in support through the loan program office in its 15 years of existence, a little over $40 billion, and then almost $100 billion in the 76 days after they lost the election and before President Trump's inauguration. Look, if those were great ideas that were benefit to the America, why didn't they do it in the 2.5 years after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed? Why did they wait till they lost the election? They changed terms and loan covenants. They basically tried to set bombs to make it hard for us to unwind the mess they'd created. That's just not a responsible way to treat American taxpayer money and to move our energy system forward. So yes, we've stepped into a lot of mess, but this stuff's all fixable. We've got an aggressive team going after it. And you see already American energy prices are down. Investments in America to bring jobs back are up. So I think we're going the right direction. But yeah, we've got a lot to clean out.
There's a lot of problems with what he just said there, but can you fathom that? My numbers were off. So it's a $40 billion over 15 years that they created the program, and then $100 billion in 76 days. That's mind-blowing. My percentages were correct. It's a 250% jump in a period of time that is like nothing at all. It gives up the game. Again, this cannot be astroturfed. You can't fake it because people can see it. And if they change power, one of the ways you stop the bleeding is you come out there and you tell everybody what the truth looked like. You have to explain it. The other thing we were hearing is that the Donald Trump administration was going to destroy the country with tariffs, right? The tariffs were going to tear everything apart. Everybody was losing it. And we saw it. And buy the dip was the other side of the argument, that when the market drops, you buy it. They always said this wasn't going to be a permanent solution. This was a stop the bleed mechanism. Here's what I think is interesting. And the analogy is like this. This is my personal tourniquet kit. I used to roll this around on the Indian reservation. You can wear this on your leg. It has a cat tourniquet in there. We talked about terrorism. We talked about having options to be able to solve problems. This is one of the cheapest, easiest. This is like a $30 little like ankle holster that holds onto a tourniquet. If you carry a gun and you don't carry a tourniquet, you're making a bad decision. This has an NPA, so a nasal airway. It also had in here, you can't see it, but it's a space blanket. I go out there and I want to stop the things that kill people fastest. And having a space blanket, that's a really big deal. Having a tourniquet, that's a big deal. Having an NPA, a nasopharyngeal airway, that's a big deal. I've got some gloves on here. You can use that as a chest seal as well. I've got some Band-Aids because that's more likely that I'm going to have a cut than I'm going to have anything else. I don't carry everything with me. The one thing I do remember about putting a tourniquet on, the so-called stop the bleed mechanisms, which is either direct pressure with some gauze, or putting a tourniquet on, which is a crank device that is like a nylon belt, it hurts like a son of a bitch. Tourniquets are so incredibly uncomfortable. If you've even done training tourniquets where you obliterate the pulse, in other words, you turn it tight enough so that there's no pulse in the lower or the distal part of the extremity, you will experience shocking pain. Now imagine you've been shot somewhere, and then someone's going to come in there, they're going to rip up above the wound, they're going to put that thing on there, and they're going to crank that sucker down to turn the bleed off. They're tightening it down like a spigot or a faucet that doesn't want to tighten. It hurts. It feels terrible. Nobody gets excited about it. That's what the tariffs look like to me. And then there's today's headline coming from CNN. The Dow is set to soar 1,000 points after Donald Trump's team dramatically lowered tariffs on China. So the way it works with the tourniquet is you obliterate those pulses. You crank it down so tight that there is no blood flowing. And then when you're done, you get in there and you have to surgically stop the bleed. You have to go and you have to sew up. You make the deal in this case. Okay? You have a vascular surgeon come in and stitch up an artery so that it's connected to the other one. And then maybe you have to splint it with something, or maybe you have to put some additional reinforcements so the vessel will hold. And then you allow the blood to go back through again. The tariffs were always a temporary measure. They were never going to be there forever. That was the whole point. Anybody who thought that otherwise, like that they were certainly going to last at that level, what they were trying to get is tariffs to drop on the other side. It sounds like that may actually happen. And so stock futures are going to surge. And so you're going to see a dramatic de-escalation in trade tensions. We're like 120 days in, like under 120 days in. It's May in his second term, in the first year of his second term. These people acted like it was forever. Because everything has to be imminent, everything has to be scary, everything has to be spooky, and the only way that this stuff works is if you keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again. You have to go out there and tout how crazy everything is and how chaotic it is. How interesting. It reminds me a lot of some of the COVID chaos that we saw. It reminds me of some of the imprecise language, the laziness of it. I saw this as a headline out there. I'm just going to grab another piece out here. This is coming from, where is this coming from? It's not CBS. Oh, it's NBC News. Look at this. Look at this article here. Imagine the same people who touted the Biden administration as crushing it and doing a fantastic job that gave away $100 billion in like green energy BS loans in 76 days. Those same people who would cheer that work and thought the Democrats were doing great are mad that the Pentagon spent at least $21 million on flights to Guantanamo Bay, which currently holds 32 illegals. Now, as I understand it, Guantanamo was like a halfway house before they sent them down further, right? So this is the disingenuous sort of move. But a $21 million political stunt might be one of the cheapest ones on record, at least recently. There's no way you can tell me that that is the real problem, that they care about the money spent. These people don't care about money. They just print money. That's what we've seen. They believe in things like quantitative easing, where you just add money into the money supply because you need more money. So why not just create it? If they can just go after and create the solution, they can easily cry about something else that's not a real problem. And again, the volume of money, $21 million, that sounds like a ton of money to me. Except those things are going to be calculated based on fuel cost. They're going to be calculated based on personnel who are getting paid one way or another, and they have to do their jobs. If you guys don't know anything about how the National Guard works, but they regularly have to take flights. There's National Guard troops. When I jumped in at Fort Benning, I don't know what it's called now, but it's still Fort Benning to me. When I jumped at Fort Benning, we went out of the back of like some Alaska National Guard aircraft. They obviously weren't stationed at Fort Benning. So what the hell were they doing? They needed to get some qualifications. So they flew down cross country, knocked some hours out. They got on the ground. Then they loaded up a bunch of paratroopers who were doing training. We all get into there in the C-130s. They take off. They spin around. They go over the drop zone. They get those hours. They get drop zone training. Like that costs a ton of money too, because it's fuel and it's our salaries and their salaries and so on. And they're like, it was just for training. It's like, yeah, but it also kept them current. That's what they do. You can get currency hours flying cargo of human beings down to Guantanamo, or you can get currency hours flying a bunch of paratroopers who are falling out the back of a C-130 at Benning onto the DZ there. There's a lot of different options. Acting like this is somehow wild or problematic. It's all about crafting narrative again. It's pretty obvious to me that's the case. And it reminded me of a bunch of the narrative that we heard. I'm going to play you a little clip of something that you couldn't have played a couple years ago. Two little pieces. One comes from Fox News, who pushed back on it, and I think inaccurately, but a reminder of how many of us said, we have some principles, by the way, and we would like to not get this shot that you guys are pushing, and here's why. And Fox News is actually continually, they're part of the sort of the media apparatus, and they have a vested interest in keeping that status quo. They're pushing back against RFK Jr., who's saying there are derivatives of the DNA of murdered babies in these shots because that's how they were developed. And a lot of people who didn't know this previously did know that starting in 2021 when you mandated that they have some of that injected in their body. And they said, not me. Fox has to push back against it, and he corrects them again. And then there's like clarifications from AI and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, if you use a moral bad that Catholics think is a problem, and many Christians who have opened their eyes up to it also see the same issues. I only say Catholics because that's one, where I sit, and two, that's the way that I made my argument when I was going against the federal government mandate. Fox News is going to defend the status quo. They're not conservative. I think Fox News is a Republican outlet, but not conservative. Conservatives say you have a right to autonomy and you should be able to make a decision. It turns out that even an old school Democrat understands that sort of thing because they actually used to care about liberty, liberal, not leftism. RFK Jr. on this one.
We also understand that some people don't do that. The MMR vaccine that we currently use has millions of particles from were created from aborted fetal tissue. Millions of DNA fragments, and there are people who have religious objections toward those, and those people should be treated with compassion. If they come to a hospital and they're sick, we need to know how to treat them. And one of the failures of the CDC in the past is they weren't telling doctors, no kid should die of measles in this country. Even in 1963, before the introduction of the vaccine, there were 400 deaths a year, and there were up to 2 million measles cases. So it's only very, very sick kids should die from measles, and nobody should.
There's some that were saying that the rubella portion of the vaccine, and you were talking about the produced from the fetal cell line, originated from an abortion that took place in the 60s. But the MMR vaccine doesn't contain the cells in its final form.
It doesn't contain cells, but it contains DNA fragments.
Got it. And so that's your point.
Yeah. So, and people are really...
Listen, like, we're just talking about derivatives of evil. Like, that's not such a big deal, is it? Like, what about derivatives of evil that didn't happen, in today's thing? Like, it's so far ago, we can't even remember. And everyone went like, I think you missed the point. If you were telling me that we were going to use drugs that were developed from Nazi experimentation on people during the Holocaust, you might have a problem with that too. If you're a thinking person, if you're a person of ethics, if you are a person who's been presented with enough information to make your own decision, and then it should be your decision at the end of the day. That was our big issue. That was the problem. That's what was being censored out of all this stuff. I'm going to talk about my friends over at Patriot Coolers who have backed us since the beginning. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about how the censorship is, if it can't get done at the state level, at the federal level, it will come down to the states. It will be Insider New Jersey. It will be people in the main wire who have to go out there and look and see what is it that their government is doing. And it will happen here in Texas. Because all of these things, they don't just quit. They don't just give up on this stuff. They keep pushing it. They just find a new method to push it. If it doesn't work on the national level, if it doesn't work at MSNBC, they are going to find a local way to do it, which means that you need to now have your attention span on 3 different things: your local, just like we did during the COVID stuff, your state, which was less important and then the federal, which for the most part didn't start until it actually came in 2021 and tried to ram it down our throats, and things like they did with that Fox News piece there. All right, first we're going to go over and talk about my friends over at Patriot Coolers. You guys get it. It's patriotcoolers.com. That's the website. Promo code KYLE, just like many of other places, saves you 10%. This is one of my, I think it's the 16-ounce coffee mug. It's about the same as any other sort of like ceramic, except it just doesn't get hot, and you can actually keep your beverage at temperature for a lot longer. This one is engraved with our suspendables flag. You guys can check all of those things out over on the Patriot Coolers website. You can scroll down into the show notes if you're so interested. If you're watching on Spotify or if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or whatever, you can expand it outward and you can check it out. And click through there, and you can see that they've pre-engraved some, kind of like the one I have sitting over on the wall, which I think is so neat that I don't actually, it's a custom one that I had made. I put a rifle on top of the flag, so you can't actually probably buy that exact one unless you build it yourself. But all the graphics are available to you, and you can customize it. And if you want to customize your own business logos or things like that, the good news is they were a little bit concerned about the tariff situation, because all of those things, because of crappy regulations, those tumblers cannot be made in the United States. The process is not allowed. And so like everybody else, whether it be Yeti or Stanley or you take your name, they're all going to be building them overseas. These guys were a little bit worried about it. Our friends at Patriot Coolers, looks like they're going to ease that. So that's probably a good relief for them. Now's probably a decent time to go and check it out. If you are looking at corporate gifts as well, you can hit me up. It's info@kyleseraphin.com, and I'll put you in touch with their brand person if that's something you're interested in doing. If you want a good cup, if you want a good device that somebody is going to advertise your company for, and they're not going to turn you away for being a conservative, so you can check them out. All right. Speaking of getting turned away, this is not about a conservative or a non-conservative. This is Dr. Sabine Hazan. She's a gastroenterologist. She started picking up a lot of steam because of COVID censorship. She obviously lost some as well. I was going to have her on the program a long, long time ago, like right when we first launched, about the first time that when we had Patriot Coolers as our first sponsor, and maybe them only. And she couldn't get her internet connection to work. And so we were unable to actually put that together. She's out there doing some interviews. She's talking about some of the interesting stuff that goes on regarding fecal transplants and the things that she understood by treating people, because some people did go outside and they just said, look, if the media is going to lie to us and the social media is going to censor us, and if the journals of medicine and so on are not going to allow us to publish results, or they're not going to allow us to have open conversations about it, if we're going to get censored, some of us don't care. And we're just going to try stuff the way medicine has always been. When you have a novel threat, you try novel solutions. One of those things was the stuff that she's going after right here. And she's talking about using ivermectin. Many of you also had that same experience. A little podcast called the Maha podcast that she was on. And I found this to be kind of an interesting, the problem, they didn't share it. This could have been something that would have made a big difference. Again, all this stuff ends up going back to COVID. How many things that were revealed to us, I think.
While people were crashing on the hydroxychloroquine Z-Pack, I didn't realize that they were crashing. I mean, I didn't know whether they took placebo or the real drug. So I would put them on ivermectin. And that's where we had the discovery that ivermectin did something to the oxygen saturation. And then that's how I discovered that ivermectin is essentially the same in the same phylum as microbes as bifidobacteria, which was the lost microbes of COVID, the bacteria that essentially severe COVID patients were lacking, and that babies have a lot of, and old people. So
you just said
it was
ivermectin's in the phylum of bifidobacteria. Bifidobacteria being the center, really, of your
research.
Of your research now. What does that mean? I think of ivermectin as a drug. What do you mean it's in the phylum of
every drug
bacteria?
Has a so if you look at what are antibiotics, right? Antibiotics are just microbes, right? I mean, if you think of you go back to the discovery, and I talk about it in my book, Let's Talk sh.t. I show the history of how antibiotics were created. So it was a doctor who basically had a petri dish on his counter, and he had a bacilli on there, and then he eats an apple. And he leaves the apple next to the petri dish, and then the apple mildews, right, has mold on it. And then the mold touches the petri dish, and the bacilli disappeared. That was the discovery of penicillin.
Really?
So whether that's an apocryphal story or not, whether that's actually what happened, or whether that's the apocryphal kind of like Sir Isaac Newton dropping the apple or getting hit on the head and then saying, aha, and then he comes up with the idea of the theory of gravity. It's kind of irrelevant, because that's actually the way that things work. And when you understand that people should be able to have free association, that accidents happen in science all the time, and those accidents turn out to be a novel thing, then you just recreate the experiment. And if they work, then you move forward and you roll it out. All of our drug treatments came from somebody taking a chance on something. And it could be as simple as leaving things on your countertop, or it could be like, we have a novel problem where people are going to die, and we would like to try this experimental treatment and see what happens next. That should be the way it works. We were stopped from that. That censorship regime that Mike Benz was talking about earlier. It's pervasive. It's a mindset that says that we get to control what is true and what is not true. I want to play you this out of the state of Texas. This is Dade Fallon, who's the speaker there, talking about a censorship bill. This is truly dangerous stuff. The idea is of the censorship bill, and you'll hear a couple of questions about it. They want to stop things that are AI generated and political speech and satire because it makes them feel bad, because it doesn't preserve the narrative that they're interested in. And this guy allegedly is a Republican. Again, Republicans are not the solution. The answer, actually, in my view, has always been conservatism. People who actually have principles about liberty, and they're willing to go to the mat and even lose friends, followers, money, jobs, access, family members, and so on. If you have principles, like, it is a problem, but only for you, it turns out.
Nothing ironic about it.
Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Luther, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
Will the gentleman yield for questions? Certainly yield for questions. Yes, gentleman yields.
Thank you. And so this bill is a Class A misdemeanor?
That is correct.
So what are the consequences for this? Could you explain that to me?
Well, you would have to, of course, it would go to the district attorney's office, and a Class A misdemeanor is, let me see if I have the actual penalties in front of me.
Excuse me?
Yeah, it's up to a year in jail. Yes, ma'am.
So up to a year in jail?
Correct.
I've been to jail for 3 days for working. Do you think that that's a fair punishment for someone creating an image or a meme?
Well, it's a very serious offense.
Up to a year in jail, sir.
Well, we could do a civil fine, correct? And as of right now.
So that person you hear speaking is Shelley Luther. She's, I think she's representative out of the Dallas area. She's one of the state Texas reps, and she opened up her salon during COVID and was removed and went to jail for 3 days because she decided that she was an American and she had the right to go to work and not be told whether or not she could make a living and whether or not she could actually pay her bills. Right? A lot of Americans experience something. We realized exactly how far these people would be willing to go and how drunk on power they have been when they thought they could control all the information. And when you put censorship bills out there, when you see a DOJ weaponized against folks and decided to go out and attack people like Douglas Murray, who was arrested in the first days of the Biden administration, about this time in the Biden administration, over memes that happened when Donald Trump was first elected and Hillary Clinton was not. That's what we've all been in this. That's what some of us have been in this fight about. I'm going on Alex Jones later on today. So if you guys are hearing this later in the day, you can check out the Alex Jones show. And if you're listening to it live, then by all means, check out Alex Jones this afternoon. I'm going to go sit down with him for a couple hours. And I'm bringing the story, in many ways, my story, but it's a lot of our story. And it touches so many different facets. It touches the facets of misinformation, censorship. It touches the COVID mandate for compliance and the requirement for it. It talks about the insidious nature of how deep people are willing to go. It talks about the lies and my friend Garrett O'Boyle, who was removed. It talks about how it touched people who want to just be prepared, who want to just have a tourniquet and a neighbor that they can rely on, because they went after guys like Mike Glover. Mike Glover is a retired Green Beret. He was a sergeant major. He started a company called Fieldcraft. Isn't that interesting that so many of these stories overlapped? And I don't know how I managed to be touching so many of them and why it all ended up, touching COVID at the end. But it does remind me that these people are willing to do some really evil stuff. And so here's a man talking about something that is objectively evil. Mike Benz put this clip out on social media. Once you listen to this kind of stuff and you realize how far people are willing to go, whether it means that they're going to inoculate you by using mosquitoes, or they're going to go out there and weaponize things like the Lone Star tick so that you can't eat meat because they want to cut down on the carbon emissions in this country. My buddy George Hill says the carbon footprint they want to reduce is you. I can't find any fault with it. I got one more thing that might shock you in just a second here, because it's the thing that is the real threat that these people are covering up for. But let's listen to this guy talking about how they could use ticks to make you stop eating meat.
Examples. So one is that people eat too much meat,
right? And if they were to cut down on their consumption on meat, then they would, it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is just too juicy. I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So, but so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance. And some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of bovine proteins. And there's actually analogs of this in life. There's this thing called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering. We can kind of possibly address really big world problems through human engineering.
The craziest thing is, that's a funny little clip end right there. That was somebody obviously screen capturing it. The craziest thing to me is that you would be willing to go out there and use something that sounds objectively terrible, like what the Lone Star tick does, and that mechanism, and you're going to try to weaponize it. It's not shocking that guy's lactose intolerant. My wife tells me that I'm lactose intolerant, but I think that's how the terrorists win. So I just eat milk and cream and ice cream and so on. I'm not going to stop doing any of that stuff. Like, you can't stop me. That guy was talking about it with his little soft fingers. If you couldn't see, if you were listening on and you were just hearing that was a effeminate-looking Asian man sitting kind of slightly on a stool with his legs crossed, talking about how meat is so juicy that you can't not eat it. Gross, dude. You can't do this stuff to us. And it's pervasive. It's not just in the medical sphere, which we saw, the COVID tyranny come down on. It's not just in the media sphere. It's also in your entertainment. And this little clip is actually very telling. This is from a podcast that my buddy Aaron Stevenson has turned me onto. I'm aware of them. I haven't sat down and watched a single entire one, but I've seen some of their clips and they're interesting. This is called Ninjas Are Butterflies. They're talking about something that Aaron, a DHS whistleblower, who's very tuned into Orthodox Christianity, he mentioned that in the movie The Passion, which recently had a re-debut because of the Easter season, they tuned out and they actually cut away a piece of prophecy from the prophet Isaiah, because that was offensive. And there was another piece of it in Robin Hood. So they're talking about censorship of American entertainment. Things that, the reason it's entertaining is because it has historical context, because it feels realistic. And when they start talking about cutting out pieces of tyranny, lest you read things that explain that maybe there is in fact tyranny around you, we got a real problem here, folks. And it's not debatable. Like it is you have to go out there and dig deeper and not just be allowed to be spoon-fed anything. And I think that's what people here like. I think that's why you're listening to this podcast, because do I know everything? Absolutely not. Do I claim to know everything? Of course not. What I do know how to do is question things. I've had people lie to my face in very plausible sounding lies, and you don't want to think that people are lying to you. But part of being an investigator, part of being a paramedic, is that people lie to you all the time. You have to consider the circumstances and what is the nature of it. When I asked somebody if they were doing any drugs today, because I want to know why their heart rate is elevated, is there a cop standing over my shoulder where they might be admitting to a narcotic use and they don't want to do that because they're concerned? The circumstances and the situation under which you get answers is important. So we have to ask about context, and we have to ask about what's going on around us. We have to ask all those questions. And we have to evaluate them critically and not just accept things. So sometimes that's uncomfortable because you have to actually expose the people around you that you want to like, that you wanted to believe are in fact lying to you. Or they're just telling you the truth, that a piece of the truth that helps them only. And in the case of things like what we've seen with these deportations, we're excited about it. You're seeing a lot of MAGA pom-poms and cheerleaders talking about it. And yet the numbers don't say that they're going to actually be successful on that yet. So you can't let up on that. It doesn't mean that people haven't quit. They've already said, we've already won. There's a real big danger on the political right of thinking that the coin toss win is in fact victory in the game. So here's this little Ninjas Are Butterflies clip. And again, it's kind of haunting to think what the depths that they went after a Russell Crowe Robin Hood. Like, that's not even the best Robin Hood. It's not even the most pervasive Robin Hood. Men in Tights is, obviously.
Didn't believe it because have you seen how certain streaming shows will edit certain parts out?
They did that for The Passion on Netflix.
Yeah.
What did they take out? They took out the verse from Isaiah at the beginning.
And I saw that. And I saw this one. I said, there's no way. Because in Robin Hood, the one with Russell Crowe, very first thing, there's a scroll that pops up and in old lettering, it says, in times of tyranny and injustice, when law oppresses the people, the outlaw takes his place in history.
And he came out of Netflix.
Only in the U.S. Canada, Ireland, people from they're like, it's on ours.
We're getting so played, you
in
guys.
America, and I just played it, and it doesn't.
We're getting so played.
It literally is just a blank screen for 10 seconds.
Everybody go buy a bow.
I mean, you talk about physical copies of things.
What are
they are erasing history, and I know it's just a dumb movie.
No,
if
but
you think they're doing it with a movie, they're doing it on such bigger levels.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes no time.
Exactly.
With digital.
So all of that stuff, that's sensationalized. But it's true that censorship is pervasive. I got this notice, speaking of censorship, speaking of self-censorship, I got this notice from Google this weekend, and it ruined my weekend. This was on Saturday night at 10:23 local time, p.m. It says Google has received and responded to legal process issued by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, my old workplace, compelling the release of information related to your Google account. A court order previously prohibited Google from notifying you of this legal process, and we are notifying and permitted to do so now. And so this was posted up on social media as well. You guys can read it. I'm going to be talking to Alex Jones about it as well. Many of you have probably also gotten things like this. I know that Twitter did the same thing. I don't want to rehash it out yet, but they did a subpoena for our Twitter. R being me and Garrett O'Boyle. By the way, we got this email at the exact same time. We both got it at the same time. He noticed, and then he posted it in our group chat, and then I went and found it too, and I went, son of a bitch. What does that mean? That means that our government had access, while I was actively suing them, to my email account, which I was using for privileged communications with my wife. They don't have any right to that. With my attorneys, they don't have any right to that. With our priests, which they had no right to. All of those are privileged communications that are a no-go zone for the FBI to go into. They should have had a taint team, and I guarantee you they did not. I can pretty much guarantee that, and we're going to FOIA to find out if that's the case. That's how crazy this is right now. And who are they actually leaning and bending over backwards for? They being our government? They being not going after the people that really ought to be there? Do you know the single biggest threat to this country, which Donald Trump has addressed with tariffs and is an ongoing problem for national security? It's the Chinese threat. And it was the threat that I worked on in the beginning, and I thought that our approach to it was utterly unserious when I was looking at it. Because there are no laws in place. Members of Congress do not have any tools providing counterintelligence agents to go out there and actually do the work. So check this out, coming out on Newsmax. This is Senator Ashley Moody. She's talking about what's happening in our universities. And if you've ever worked counterintelligence, this is like a no-brainer. We already knew this.
And this should shock no one. So the report came out. It said right now in the United States of America, at one of our universities, there is an organized, orchestrated spy ring. To put this in perspective, when I got here, I said, when I was told that there was a Chinese law in place that required Chinese nationals, including students that come to the United States on visas, and by the way, we take 300,000 Chinese students a year into our universities. There's a law in the books that says they have to provide intelligence gathering and information to the CCP. We also had information in Congress before I even got here that they were setting up these programs to organize spies and push them into our universities using visas. And when I got here and realized that there was no law stopping the visa program, even though we had that information, I immediately launched a bill that would end visas for Chinese students. Now, nothing against Chinese students that want to learn, but if you have a government that is enlisting them, and not just enlisting them, requiring them by law under penalty to be espionage agents when they get here, we cannot keep inviting them into our nation. And so time after time over the last few years, we have found Chinese students with drones, cameras on our military bases, stealing information at our universities, and nothing has been done. So when this report came out 2 days ago, I was not surprised because we launched this bill and we've been advocating and trying to get someone's attention that there were.
Yeah, they've been trying to get somebody's attention. You heard Mike Benz say earlier on that one little clip talking about the National Science Foundation being sort of like the weaponized arm coming out of the Pentagon. I didn't know that. I haven't considered it that. But I know that the National Science Foundation has absolutely no teeth, and they give money to American scientists who turn around and give their research and technology straight to the Chinese. We know that students come in here writ large. One of the people I investigated was a Chinese professor, an American citizen of Chinese ethnic descent who naturalized as a citizen, who had a huge lab in China with millions and millions of dollars of funding. Also had a bunch of millions of dollars from the American government. Sponsored hundreds of what they call delegations coming into the United States. You don't need everyone to be a spy. But it turns out that there's a law in the books in China saying that everyone is a spy. They all have to work on behalf of the CCP. This is the same thing about Google, who does business over there. And if they have server farms, they have to open up a backdoor to the Chinese government. All of these people that are selling us out tend to do so for the most scary, enemy there is. And they act like something else is going on. They act like you're the problem. Militia, violent extremists, gun owners, white supremacists, blah, blah, blah. Like, even though I don't like white supremacists and I don't want to be around them, it doesn't mean they're the biggest threat to the homeland. They're not. They just objectively are not. The biggest threat to the homeland are people that are lying to you, to your face, and demanding your fealty without any sort of repercussions and without any choice that you would have. So maybe that's why I think this is funny. This is a story that came out of the New York Post. It's called the PSAKI bomb. They tried to do a hot swap. They tried to do the Indiana Jones swap of Jen Psaki and Rachel Maddow in a time slot. And so she now has she was the liar and she was the Ginger Goebbels, right? She was the face of the regime that the Biden administration came in and covered down on the COVID vaccine mandate and said that what they were doing was right and was changing her verbiage every single time. She's listed in my complaint to the FBI as being on record saying we should have tests every 72 hours. Then she changed her mind and said, everyone thinks a week is reasonable. We just did like science by consensus, hence my coverage of some science stuff. You guys call her Peppermint Patty. I call her Ginger Goebbels. She might as well be called the PSAKI bomb right now because she went into that time slot. They thought they could just give you anything and they could have a lie and you would accept it. And Americans, even on the political left, are tired of it, which is why they ended up doing the thing they did. This is the briefing. It had a strong showing on Tuesday, 1.2 million viewers. They had a key demographic of 25 to 54 where they had 140,000 viewers, give or take, and they lost 200,000 and they lost more than half of the people in the key demographics where they make the most money. By comparison, Fox was like something like 2x that and change. The biggest audiences are starting to slip away from people who lie because Americans want actual information. That's what they want. And maybe they just want to be left alone and not have to worry about politics. Because wasn't there a time when we didn't have to worry about that? This is a surprisingly funny thing and a very astute observation by David Hogg, who I have absolutely no love for at all. But he was on with Bill Maher and he just said, wouldn't young people like to just get back to the business of trying to get laid and get a job and be successful before they have to worry about politics every single second? It's kind of a reasonable take. It's why he thinks Donald Trump won. I don't think he's wrong.
Right now, what I think happened last election is younger men, they would rather vote for somebody who even if they don't completely agree with, they don't feel judged by, than somebody who they do agree with, that they feel like they have to walk on eggshells around constantly because they're going to be judged or ostracized or excommunicated. And what's interesting about this moment is it feels like the two parties in some senses have flipped where, Republicans used to be the judgmental assholes in many ways. And since many Democrats, despite us, I would say for most of us coming from the right place of wanting to do the right thing, we've created a culture where we say, well, if you say the wrong thing, you're excommunicated. And that's just not how human beings work. Nobody is perfect. But ultimately, what we have to do here is figure out how to bring people back in and work towards the bigger goal of advancing the future of this country and helping young people especially get by so that they're able to focus on their lives and, getting with a young woman or something like that instead of how are they going to pay their rent, for example, or how are they working their two jobs. Young people should be able to focus on what young people should be focused on, which is how to get laid and how to go and have fun.
David Hogg for president, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, and that's all silliness. But in all honesty, there was a time when most people that were young didn't have to worry about politics because they thought that grown-ups were handling it. And what we've seen is the grown-ups have basically abused that privilege, including people in our own generations, whatever generation you're in. You've seen people out there that have been part of that machine. So that's a long-winded way of getting started this week. I hope you guys appreciated some of the insight there, and you'll reflect in your own lives about the things that are going on and, the critical nature that you need to have about everything out there. Join us on Rumble. You can join us on YouTube. Both of them, it's / Kyle Seraphin or at Kyle Seraphin if you're over on YouTube. You can find us on Locals. You guys get the Sunday sit down a day early. Hopefully you guys watch that at some point. KyleSeraphin.com. If you want to financially support the program, you can go do it over there. Again, it's a one-man show. This is what it looks like. And if you want to join on Spotify, I know if you're listening on iHeartRadio, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify also gives you a video option. You just type in KyleSeraphin.com or KyleSeraphinShow.com rather, and you can easily share and get access to the video. So you can switch between audio and video. And we appreciate all of that. All right, that's what I got today. That was kind of a palate cleanse a little bit. I've got another one for you tomorrow. That'll be kind of fun. But until then, let's shut it down for today. And if you want to see more, you can always go over and watch me on Alex Jones. I'll be spending 2 hours there. I usually end up on Owen Schroyer's show as well. So I'll be going down to the InfoWars for an in-person sit down with those folks. God bless all of you. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.